Today we'll talk about GMAT versus GMAT focus. So we'll compare their content, their percentiles, how they match up, and who should prefer what. Let's get started. Let's compare the content of the two exams. GMAT has sentence correction. GMAT Focus does not have it. Now, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, in case you've been working on sentence correction for quite a while and have not been able to improve, certainly it's a good thing for you. But then, if I really think about it, for most learners, sentence correction was a topic in which they could improve very quickly, let's say within 2 months, and they needed less time for sentence correction questions. So they could actually steal some time away and invest more in critical reasoning in RC. So then, if I really think about it, I think it's not a good thing that sentence correction is gone, but then well, we have to live with it. GMAT has AWA, that is the essay. GMAT Focus does not have it. So, well, I would say good riddance. We don't have to write the essay anymore. Great. GMAT has geometry. So, it has triangles, right triangles, the circles, and then solids, etc. GMAT Focus does not have any of that. Normally, it is good news for learners because they used to struggle on geometry for the most part, not everyone, of course, but for majority used to struggle on geometry. So, that is gone. GMAT has coordinate geometry. So not only those lines, slopes and parabolas and circles, also rotation of lines. So all those things were there. Whereas in GMAT Focus, we have something called graphing. Now graphing is part of coordinate geometry. Basically, it comes under algebra, and what we do here is linear equations and quadratics, etc. So those relations between slope and intercepts, etc., all those are still there. They are covered in linear equations and algebra. So how would you graph them? Or how would you graph quadratic equations? Those things are still there. I would say the interesting concepts of coordinate geometry have been retained, and a little more advanced concepts have been done away with. So all in all, perhaps good news. Now, GMAT has sequences, whereas GMAT Focus has sequences as well as series. So, what is a series? Basically, when you add the terms of a sequence, you get a series. And they also have something called partial sum, etc. So, there are a few new things in GMAT Focus. GMAT has statistics, so your mean, median, mode, etc., standard deviation. GMAT Focus has a little more of statistics. It also has normal distribution. It also has skew distribution. So those are the additional things that we'll need to work on GMAT Focus. But then those are, not a whole lot to do. So I think that's reasonably okay. Overall, I would say the content of GMAT was, of course, a whole lot more than GMAT Focus. But the point is that whatever we do have in GMAT Focus, we will need to do it really, really well. Before we start a discussion on percentiles, keep in mind that GMAT Focus percentiles are expected percentiles that GMAT has calculated based on the performance of students in the current test. These percentiles could move a lot in the first few years. The percentile comparison. So this is a quant percentile comparison. What are we showing over here? Here we have GMAT and here we have GMAT Focus. So look at this. 51 was a 97 percentile. Here 90 is the 100 percentile, the topmost score. And what really does 100 percentile mean? Perhaps no one would be getting it because 100 percentile essentially means that 100% of the people have a score lower than yours. So then perhaps they're not really going to give this 90 to anybody. But then look at how the percentiles used to fall dramatically very quickly. What has happened in GMAT Focus is that granularity has increased. Like there are a whole lot more scores, let's say, between from 97% to 40%, we had only 51 to 44 scores to go. But here from 90, okay, let's ignore 90. From 89 to 76, we have a lot more granularity over here in the middle and higher ranges. So what does that mean? It means that whenever you put in some extra effort in quant, it will show with an improved score because there are a lot of steps in between. Over here, that granularity was missing. So for example, between 48 and 49, you would suddenly dip by almost 10 percentile. Just one score would make your percentile reduce by almost 10%. Here, that the dip when you go from one percentile to from one score to the other will be relatively much smaller. So that is why it will be easier for you to go one score, right? So since the granularity at mid and higher levels in quant has increased, it's actually good news because you will be able to show your quant prowess. If you work hard at it, you will get a better score. You will be able to stand out. You will be able to distinguish yourself from other people. Yeah, which had become extremely hard over here because almost everyone would lie in this range only, right? Now let's look at verbal percentile comparison. Now what happened in quant was that GMAT focus has increased the granularity, whereas they have surprisingly done the opposite in the verbal section. They have decreased the granularity. So initially in GMAT verbal, also today, that is in GMAT verbal, these scores are kind of unattainable. Almost no one gets them. Very few people get them. Here also, I would say these scores will remain somewhat unattainable. Very few people will get them, the top few scores. But then look at what happens. From 96 to 91, you suddenly jump down to, when you go to 75, you go to a 19 percentile. The steps here are fewer. The granularity has decreased a whole lot, which means that to go from one score to the other, you will need to work a whole lot. It will take you a lot of effort because the difference of 10 percentile between one score from 81 to 80, there is actually a reduction of 10 percentile, right? There'll be a sudden reduction when you make some errors, right? So then showing your prowess in verbal, especially in the middle scores, is going to become a little difficult. So either you are over here where you're like really, really good at verbal, then you can showcase that you're really good at it. But in almost everyone will lie in around this range, right? So then the granularity here has reduced, and that's not really good news for verbal. It means that your effort is not going to reflect that much in it. So what would we advise people to do? Either be amazing at it, yeah, otherwise be mediocre at it. Don't worry too much about it and invest yourself very well in the other two sections. Yeah, now data insights is not really comparable to integrated reasoning. The two sections are different. In data insights, we'll have all data sufficiency questions as well. So there's a big part of quant in data insights. And also integrated reasoning, I would think that till now people would not really have put in a whole lot of effort in integrated reasoning, but now they will. So these percentiles may change a whole lot. But anyway, we see that, at the look, a lot of these scores are kind of unattainable, I would say, almost. So you would have to be somewhere in this range for it to make sense. What has happened now with GMAT Focus is that you have to do really well on all the three sections. Now it will matter in your complete score, right? So let's do an overall percentile comparison. First of all, look at GMAT Focus. These scores are all 100 percentile up to 735. So I'm not even sure what that means. Yeah, is it that they're not going to give these scores to anybody? Perhaps. But then the achievable scores would likely start from 725. Then from 725, I would say the granularity is kind of similar. It's not very different. Because look at that, this is about 76% over here, and then you have about 80% over here. So when I talk about, and all said and done, these scores were kind of difficult to get before also, right? So then from here to here, it is quite similar to what it is over here to here. They've not really changed much in the percentile rankings. With every 10-point difference, the percentile reduces by about the same value. Just like over here, with every 10-point difference, it reduces by the same value. So the granularity in the overall score has not really changed. What has changed is the kind of score that you will get in hand. Of course, it will end with a 5 instead of a 0 now. But also, if let's say you were targeting a 700, now you should target about 60 points less, 55 to 65 points less. So you would be targeting, let's say, about 635 on GMAT focus. But do keep in mind that now you'll need to do well in three sections, right? If you perform very poorly in one of the sections, it will be a problem to some of the schools. It will be a red flag. So now you will need a green flag in all the three sections and, of course, in the overall score as well. GMAT Focus now allows you to review your answers of a particular section and edit at most 3 of them. Practically speaking, you may not have the time to review and edit, but this feature could be very useful in certain cases. We will discuss these in detail in our next video on this topic.